Hey everyone, thanks for joining. As a reminder, attendance in this meeting is agreement to abide by the Linux Foundation Code of Conduct. Also, please register your attendance and the meeting notes doc, which Joshua has just pasted again for the folks who just joined, since you can't see prior chat history. We have one thing on the menu, which is just a SLSA v1. If there's any other topics to discuss, please just add them to the agenda, and we'll schedule them, or we'll make sure we have time. I guess before we begin talking about 1.0, is there any other topics or anything people want to say beforehand? Okay. As always, like if there's particular issues you want to discuss, just like drop it in the agenda and we'll talk about it. As an FYI, I just submitted PR number 502, which is a rewrite of the levels page for 1.0. It got review from several folks. As a reminder, we'll just consider approval by at least one person to be sufficient to submit for 1.0, and then we'll do like a final pass of the fully formed draft. So for folks who don't want to read every single pull request, but this one's like a significant rewrite of levels, and it reframes the levels and how we describe them. I think it's certainly not done, and there's like a bunch of to-dos in there. I just also sent out 503, which shifts the emphasis to like policy and verification, which is something that we had discussed in prior meetings. This one, so this doesn't actually update the requirements page yet. I just haven't done it yet. But it in terms of like the high level description of each level, it effectively adds a requirement that we set an expectation of how a package is supposed to be built, and then you actually verify it, which will then have to translate into formal requirements for implementation. So if you have an opinion on this topic, it would be valuable to gather feedback there. I tried to incorporate the feedback I've gotten so far. But that one is actually a specification change, difference from 0.1. And then the last topic specific topic I wanted to discuss is I just made a bunch of changes to issues on GitHub around the same thing around verification. And so I tried to condense into 3 issues. One is the first one, number 130, that covers like the difference between automatic and manual verification, which is something that we've kind of talked about a little bit, but it's not formally in the spec. And something from Tom Hennon really stuck with me, which is that like we try to automatically verify artifacts, but have to manually verify systems. And so I suggest that we kind of go down that route. And then assuming that we want to do that, then I broke it up into 2 other issues, or I repurposed existing issues. One to cover the automatic verification of artifacts of like how do you set expectations? Do you have to check the source repository? What has to go in the provenance? Who checks what? Signatures, etc. And that I think would also define, we had to figure out something about roots of trust there. Not just from like a cryptographic perspective of PKI, but also who trusts what system at what level. We'll have to have some sort of system there. And then the other issues around how do we verify that systems actually meet the requirements. And I think this is where like OSCAL, I'm guessing the OSCAL, because there's another issue around OSCAL that I think Melba had filed. And we also talked about like this survey of evidence of security claims. So I think that's like where that would go, because that's a missing major piece from the 1.0 proposal that we haven't done yet. So I guess I'll stop rambling there, but that's kind of an update from my side of pull requests and issues.
And Mark, for the one pull request you merged, I think it was this morning, you said we can, like, there's still some open items in there. We can kind of, you just wanted to get it in there for now, and then we can kind of reopen some of that, right?
Yeah. Feel free to comment, like if you either want to open a separate issue or just comment directly on the pull request. Either works for me. I just because it's kind of a big change, I figured it was easier to submit, and then we could make diffs off of that, because GitHub doesn't allow you to have like chained pull requests, and so it makes it really hard if you have one open one and then you do a subsequent one on that.
Right.
So I figured submit it, and then we could just
we can just attack it again.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
Subsequent changes. Like at a minimum, we could, if there's going to be a big item and it's not the top priority, I'd rather add a to-do and kind of work on the top priority items first, and then and then we could work on that, whittle that down. But either way would work. Yeah, any other thoughts on any of those things?
For the Mark, my thought actually is around kind of piqued my interest when you're talking about, like the theme around like what should someone look for when they're trying to verify an artifact, right? And that's kind of like, what should you look for in the provenance doc, right? Like there's a lot in there, right? So like, are you talking about kind of more like, hey, like these are the 3 things that are probably a good thing to look for, like the ref from the commit, the actual repo itself, like that would be helpful for me, right, as a consumer, I imagine, to have that pointed quickly.
Yeah, I think that covers issue 46. And if you click on the issue, Tom Hennon had like posted kind of like a long initial post about various things that we could possibly check. I don't think we have any sort of, I think we have a shared agreement that we want to check something. I don't know if we all agree on exactly what that looks like. Vitsa had presented in weeks past around like a model around, what that might look like at a high level. I just, at the very last post there, I just posted 2 hours ago. I'm guessing what we may want to do is kind of separate into, there's a roots of trust question of like both PKI and then also who you trust at what level. Like I trust GitHub Actions and I think it's a level 3 thing, versus some other company might say, no, it doesn't meet our standards. I trust Circle CI or whatever. That one, I don't know if we could come to some sort of universal agreement, but it probably will. It also relates to the, if you remember, if you saw it, there was a presentation a couple weeks back in September, a couple weeks ago, around the SLSA conformance proposal. Around there's like the 2-tiered system of like self-attestation. I think it's related there around like you could have some, I trust anything that so-and-so says is good. So there's kind of like a roots of trust. But then I think there's probably an the current thing that was just submitted, I would call it expectation, or I think there's a draft pull request or a pending pull request around like expectations for what the artifact, how it should be built around. And my feeling is we want to keep that as small as possible. Like, what is the minimum necessary in order to prevent the threats that we want to prevent? Like, that an upload, a maintainer or a compromised maintainer credential is used to upload a package that is inauthentic in some way. And for those, I suspect let me actually present so we have some sort of visual. I can't, oops. I'm very visual, so like I can't just listen to someone drone on and on. Chrome tab. And so so that I suspect will probably want to be like the source repository, I think, at least for open source, will be necessary. I don't know. For closed source, I don't know if maybe the requirements are different, but for open source, like the source repository and probably something how it was built, because if, for example, someone takes a Git repo, but then runs the command wget something else like, and just plops in and say that's the artifact, and it doesn't actually use the code, we'd have to protect against that. And that's like not exactly to bind by the producer or the consumer, but it's almost like a contract between them that like the producer says this software came from this place, and the consumers have some agreement that like future versions are going to, this one and future versions are going to look like that. And I've made my decision based on that analysis. And so you kind of don't want that to change or something like that. So I feel like there's that piece, that like core piece. And then there's additional things that either the producer or the consumer might want to check also. Like while you're at it, you might also want to check that maybe that it's tested, that has an SBOM, that it's not just any workflow in the repo, but the specific workflow, or like it has this properties or something. Those I think are kind of like value add things, but in my mind are not requirements for SLSA. And because I feel like we kind of get caught up in that a bit of like, some folks like, well, I want to check this, I want to check that. And so I'm thinking maybe it'd be helpful to split out like, what is required by SLSA in order to prevent these specific threats versus what are additional things that people could want to do and that maybe we recommend allowing people to do, but it's not strictly required. So anyway, that's kind of where me personally, I've been thinking lately.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar space in that there's kind of three classes of like documentation required here. The roots of trust is something that SLSA requires, but we don't want to mandate like who you trust or how you define that trust relationship. We just need you to establish that trust relationship in order to be able to implement SLSA. The expectations, the minimum expectations, I definitely think we do need to define as part of SLSA, like you said, Mark, to provide the protections that SLSA is designed to protect. And then the final two, the producer and consumer additional requirements, are like could be recommendations or implementation guidelines that fall into like some supplementary documentation, maybe.
I think I also agree, right? Like the SLSA provenance is kind of like a commodity, right? So like the spec is like defining what that commodity should be and what the specification of that commodity properties it should have. But maybe we as SLSA, as you're kind of saying, Mark and Josh, like it's, there's a benefit to what someone can do with that commodity after, right? And maybe we'll give some high level benchmark recommendations, but not requirements. Is that kind of where you're going also, Josh?
Yes, I think so. Like we need to provide some guidance, but it shouldn't be. Yeah, we don't want to tie people to certain implementations for those things, I think.
Right. Like show them what's possible with the commodity, maybe.
Any other thoughts?
I'm mostly just happy to see this starting to get like defined, because we've had this as a notion from early on, and we've used some terms that have caused a lot of distraction. But it's nice to see this like taking form.
Okay, so I suspect probably, folks need to read through and think through, but any comments, even if it's like a thumbs up or agreement, would be valuable. Or if anything doesn't look good or you have other thoughts, certainly contributions are very, very welcome. I think in particular those like the automatic verification, manual verification need quite a bit of work of like thinking through the details and like how we phrase it and what the requirements are. And so even if you're not like don't have the capability of like writing the fully fleshed out wording that sounds is unambiguous, etc. Just adding general ideas to the comments is really useful, because then we could like that's kind of raw material to form into like the actual text that we put in the doc. Like most of what I've been doing is just taking other people's ideas that they've written in the comments and just like reformatting them and trying to get the consensus that was spread across all these issues and writing up in a nicer way. And actually, that's maybe a good segue. Just as there's discussion before of like what the timelines are and how long when's it going to be ready. I think at the current pace is not look like we're on track for getting this finished. Like originally we were hoping for like this month. Like I don't think we're at all on track for that. I think we need more contributors to actually, write the text and form it. So
I would love to get it out, Mark, but I think it's much better. It's much more important to make it good than make some arbitrary deadline.
Yeah, that's what I'm going with. And so just FYI, like this is the pace that we're going, and it's okay. But if we had more contributors who, were writing stuff and figuring stuff out, then it would go faster.
Yeah, completely agree with that, and I've rattled the same. Well, I've indicated the same in the past, and I'm guilty as most of not writing stuff, and I'm hoping to find some more time to do that in future. But the question I want to ask is whether there's anything we could do from a process standpoint that would make it easier for folks to contribute, whether it's like well, yeah, I don't want to color. I'll leave the question open to start. So if folks are interested in contributing, what's stopping you, and how could we improve that?
I think. Well, okay. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Yeah, for me, I think it's just not having a clear, or let me put this differently. I don't really want to step on anyone's toes if they've already started working on something. And so I think having a clear list of who owns which tasks is what I've been missing to actually, contribute something.
I mean, aside from time, which I don't think anyone can give me, yeah, I think it's mostly like, hey, here's a task, but I don't typically work in GitHub. It's not something I do daily, and so it's not something that I like think to work in. But I think I'm used to like Jira's and project management of like, here's your task, review this by this date. Okay, cool, I can do that. Like, not necessarily. I mean, I know that just sounds like, hey, I need to be spoon-fed my work, but like, it's so external to my normal work, and this is my first like OpenSSF group that I've contributed to. So I like apologies for not contributing more. I'm just kind of not really sure where to be, honestly. So.
I mean, disparate project management systems is definitely like a problem for everyone, I think. So no need to feel bad about that. Aaron, did you want to?
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I just started contributing, right? Like in this spec, I've started to actually, here's a tip for everybody, put on a block of time on your calendar to dedicate to logging into GitHub and just commenting on these pull requests. And honestly, Mark, right, like feedback, right, the pull request that we were working on, the, what is this, 502, was pretty massive, right? So like going through that, like I try to just kind of go through and find pieces that I felt a little bit passionate about, and like I just commented on there, I'm probably going to try to open a new pull request to try to reword some of that authenticated requirement. So that's kind of how I'm planning on contributing back. But I think maybe like if we have smaller blocks, right, of things that we want to tackle, that would help some of these folks that are talking about, you know, like let's try to break it down. Maybe that could help.
Yeah, if I
Yeah.
can jump in for a second. Sorry. If I can jump in for a second, to piggyback off of what Aaron was saying, I think having a priority list of what we want to really tackle in which order, yeah, would be helpful. Because I've also just been going through GitHub issues that I just sort of randomly, that are tagged with this maybe 1.0 tag. But it's just, I've been choosing them sort of arbitrarily based on what I find interesting. So yeah.
I just want to jump on Aaron's comment as well and say that while we initially asked about how can we make it easier for folks to write stuff, also like jumping in and doing the review is super helpful as well, because the more review happens, well, the iteration through the review process has really helped consistently improve the docs, but also the more review happens, I think ultimately the more we free up bandwidth for folks to do some writing if there's more people reviewing and the review load is split up. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and just I'll just reply one more time if you don't mind. You know, me reviewing 502 now inspired me to go and write and hopefully contribute, right? So like that's, I like that feedback loop right there. And you know, Mark, I'm not trying to come at you saying that was giant PR, but maybe that's good in a way, right? To like kind of get some content reviewed.
So I think we've talked a few times about having clearer ownership of tasks, and I recognize that from other kind of open source communities, like people are worried about starting to work on something and then finding out that someone else has done the work. So I guess I think in the past we've suggested that people just kind of comment on an issue and we can assign them, but I think probably the other thing is for the maintainers, myself and Mark and Mike, to also indicate on the issues, the things we're working on by using the assign piece. Is that a help for making it clear when something has ownership, or do you think we need more something? Can't say what I'm thinking. Something more concrete somewhere that indicates kind of the ownership of pieces of the work. Sorry, that was a really rambly question.
Yeah, personally, like I don't know, I almost never notice the assignees in the top right corner. I don't know if anyone, we never use them, and I mean, we could start using them. I don't know if other people, probably a comment would be a symbol. Just like the last comment, like I'm starting working on this. I suspect, I think my guess is, so I think maybe the two most valuable things would, one, if we, maybe we could do it like just in the rest of the time in this meeting of like come up with like a prioritized list and kind of break things down. Because right now it's like a big, and GitHub doesn't make this easy, like a big flat list of stuff. It's not, the issues are not particularly well organized. They're written by a bunch of different people at different points in time, which is effectively like more people, like your past self and your current self. And so like, it's not clear like what they all add up to, what they all mean. And whereas if we had some sort of hierarchy, I think that would help too, but we don't have it. Maybe we could kind of come up with like a couple top priorities. I also think, as I mentioned before, I think a lot of the things are, the difficult part is kind of figuring out the core idea of what we're trying to say and like what we're trying to do. And like, even if it's not worded carefully or it's like not quite right, I think sharing that in a comment has been really valuable, because like over time we kind of just form the opinion collectively of like, for example, here's one, better defined source. I'm just picking one kind of at random. Let me just share my screen. Like this is one of like, what does it mean for source? What are the specific requirements? Why are we trying to do this? The particular issue is like, if you have a GitHub, let's take GitHub Actions as an example, because again, we're using GitHub as our platform for the repository hosting. The build configuration, like we could definitely attest to that like the workflow file is there, but we can't actually attest to that the source code was there, because that the first step is to check out some repository, which is usually the same exact commit that triggered the workflow, but not always. It could check out anything. What is the model there? How do we do that? And so I think, you know, for contributing if you have a little bit of time, just thinking about it and kind of inching us forward along is valuable. And, you know, just doing it in a comment, and then you're not effectively working on it long term. If you're working on like a doc or something, it doesn't have to be Markdown, just any sort of thing. Maybe we could add a comment of like, I've been working on it, I have a draft, you know, but even if you're not ready to share, just saying something that could be a way of kind of, that way people who are also thinking about it could connect. Or they could just say, okay, that person think about it, I'm not going to.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to make a similar suggestion to kind of start sharing initial thoughts in the issue tracker and almost using that as a way to draft contributions, and that helps a bit with the Markdown document and Git workflow being kind of foreign to some contributors who still have plenty of valuable insights to bring.
I could list like things in my mind that I think would probably be easy to contribute. Well, I don't think any of these things are particularly easy. Maybe more standalone and kind of maybe good for getting started. One at the top of my mind is the model in terminology around. We already have a model for the build terminology. We need. I just mentioned that the better defined source one, have an equivalent for source terminology, but also I think I just submitted a to do that. Oops. Yeah, like ecosystem project, like for like what a package is. We don't really have a definition for that. Like what a repository is, a registry, etc. Also defining what an attestation and provenance is, showing a picture of like a build spits out provenance and then it gets consumed. Those would all be, I think, things that we don't, is more on the writing side and less on the figuring it out side. I mean, we could come up with a better term and we could talk about that, but I think that's more shovel ready in that it's not like, well, how do we integrate policy into the specification? But more, pick something and write the diagram. So that would be one kind of category, I think. I feel like here, better define source. Where is this one? That issue here. Define package system. I'm not sure we have an issue for that one. We should file an issue. And someone else had a diagram of like how it like the build thing spits out an attestation.
Yes.
That was one diagram. Let me present, by the way, so.
Mark, you are muted.
I do that every
As
time.
always when you share, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Sorry.
every time. Probably every video of this is me making that mistake. Yeah, so the model terminology I think are more shovel ready. Thanks so much for pointing that out. I think it's kind of ready to write, although some of the terminology is figuring stuff out. So I think comments, like both comments on the issue or actually writing a draft would be valuable. This, for the verification piece, I think it's more figuring out the concepts and would require kind of a larger investment in time. Because it's more like figuring out the whole, like how the whole system works. And so if that's kind of more your thing, that would be, I think that's a whole area. What else? Define trusted control. I think there's like the meta issue of categorizing issues. Are there any other major chunks? I'm sure there are. There's, I think, various things around clarifications and improved wording. There's like to-dos around something around digital signatures. Oh, thanks. What's in it? There's also the so there's a bunch of specific one around like service generated. Like, what does that term mean? Oops. Like cleaning up specific issues, I think would be valuable too.
Yeah, I guess the problem with issue cleanup is that only you have to have permissions on the repository to like close issues and things.
In a high level, I think also like splitting up build versus source. I think there's more work there. Update requirements, MD, update index.md. I can take that. That's what I'm working on now. And hopefully that will allow us to make, more direct contributions, not stomp on each other's changes.
Perhaps we should move the starter issues list here to a top level part of the doc and let people add their name and use that as a kind of a budget project tracking space.
Yeah. So what I can do is go through the issues. Would it be helpful to like categorizing along these lines? Is that helpful?
I mean, I suspect it's just helpful to have some discussion like this and indicate specific issues that folks might jump in on. And maybe we should try and like reserve just a bit of the meeting each week to groom a list of starter issues.
And to go further, maybe, there might be someone that wants to contribute to issues or close issues, but they feel like a little, hesitant around trying to do that. So maybe we can go through and save some time each meeting to collectively go through doing that, right? And then we can kind of learn and feel more confident together. I think that would make sense, like reserve time just for, hopefully it's not a big issue, but, just building up the confidence together maybe, right?
Yeah, good idea. So let me propose this. One thing that I think is a less ambiguous. A lot of these are pretty ambiguous issues. I think the less ambiguous one is the terminology one. Can I propose that is like for folks who want to contribute can work on that. Some folks on my team had started a doc around that, and what I can do later today is gather all these terminology things into one bucket, so it's not spread apart so many issues, or like make maybe one master issue that like lists all the other sub issues, and have folks work on like terminology and examples for like packaging and source, etc. Because I feel like that's pretty concrete, and is maybe a good way to get started, because then it's like you kind of know when you're done, right? It's like we need to define this thing, because this is something that's been bothering me for a while, that we have these to-dos, and like we use like the term ecosystem but don't say what an ecosystem is, etc. To avoid confusion.
Hey Mark.
Yeah.
This is John Speed. I'm glad to work on that part. I guess my question is, for instance, for ecosystem, is the lack of a definition blocking other action? I'm just trying to understand what, in some sense, how the definitions help you and others move quicker or do stuff better.
I guess that's true. Is the top of the list? I think the term package, well, within Google, we've had a lot of confusion around what we mean by package. Of like, is it the specific artifact, like a thing with a hash? Is it the concept of like, _JS? Is it a version of a package which could result in multiple artifacts? And so like internally, we have some doc that's like agreed upon of like what we're going to use.
Roger.
But is it strictly required? Probably not. That's a good point.
Okay. Just curious. I'm glad you. I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, I wish. Sorry to interrupt. Let me turn my volume. I wish GitHub allowed us to assign priorities, right? Because that would probably not be a blocker, right? That would be not the P0 in Google speak. I think a P0 is figuring out this verification stuff. A P0 would be a bunch of clarification things. I don't think any of them in particular, if we didn't solve them, would be blockers. Another, I think, is I'd call clarifications. Well, depending on the specific clarification, probably P1.
Mark,
Does any folks have other things that are like critical that like if we didn't do, we couldn't release 1.0 without it? Aaron?
Help me understand correctly. I think one of the P0s, right, to release 1.0 is defining the source requirements. Because do we actually have those defined right now?
No, we're going to defer that for a future version.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I think we can, we can abuse labels to indicate priority on GitHub issues, but I think it's probably in the near term much more useful just to have the discussion, like when we're all here about which things are important. So, yeah, curating this list, regardless of how we regardless of how we store the list, curating the list together as a group seems to be a good use of time. Mark, did you say you would share your definitions you've been using internally, or should we just start something new?
I'll share it. And also post it on the Slack channel whenever it's ready. I think I'm finding it difficult now because it's just like this long list. How many issues are there? It's like 50 issues, right? It's just so many to even, like, I'm constantly like rescanning and trying to prioritize. And I think we really just need hierarchy. And so,
or even just top priority, work these now, pick 5, label, work now.
Well, like, I mean, in terms of like priorities for 1.0 of like what we actually want to accomplish, I think one is split build versus source. Include verification, which we have like the automatic verification artifacts, manual verification systems.
We've got some that involve defining terms used in the spec, right? So definitions.
Yeah. Yeah, improve terminology
and definition.
Clarify.
Yeah.
Etc. There's probably like fixed specific issues that are like blocking adopters of 0.1. I don't know what those are yet, but I suspect there's probably some list of issues that are more important than others. Like, oh, this thing is unclear, or it's like ill-defined or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what those are.
We have a few adopters on the call, so hopefully they will tell us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is here. All right. So I think a good next step would be I can take all the issues. I'll probably just use a spreadsheet because doing it in GitHub directly is too painful. And make some sort of hierarchy and share it with everyone. And then we could see like how does this, or a spreadsheet or a doc or something like that. See how it looks, and see if we could kind of, each thing could kind of roll up to some sort of larger objective. I think that would make it a little bit clearer, and also to John's point of like, what is the most important thing? What are actual blockers? What are just nice to haves? And then we could kind of vote and agree. I'm like, oh, I don't think that's important.
If you put it, if you put it in a spreadsheet or document, people could actually vote on the different lines. And GitHub used to have that at some point. They removed it, which is unfortunate. There's no easy way to vote on issues.
Yeah, I wish we had a different issue tracker. Yeah, spreadsheet seems like a decent compromise for now. Okay.
I assume, Mark, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I assume when you say all, you only mean the things in the 1.0 milestone. So
Yes, the whatever. So this would not be an ongoing process. This would be specifically for this this project.
I'm just trying to scope your work, because putting all of the issues in a hierarchical spreadsheet sounds like too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this list right here, splitting, clarification, a couple adoption and terminology don't seem like they all seem like worthy things to do before 1.0. And don't seem like an infinite list. I'll add. I mean, yes, this work, but
Yeah, I'm hoping that once we have we see it all in one list that actually makes sense, we could reword things and merge issues. It probably would be valuable to just merge issues that are all about the things and have GitHub has this task list thing, or like checkboxes, and then we could kind of go and tick off those. I think that'd be easier to read than having this flat list of 50 issues. Or somewhere have that sort of hierarchy easily available. Just going through and merging the two because I realized we have these two lists that are basically the same. Okay, any more to talk about here? We're basically out of time now.
Thanks for volunteering to do some more project management, Mark. Hopefully that smooths the on-ramp for everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
In terms of next week, I am not going to KubeCon. Do we have quorum to meet? Well, I guess we could just try a meeting, and if no one shows up, then we'll just cancel.
Yeah, I know I'll be here. Thank you for doing all that.
Sure. Anything else? All right, sounds good. And again, so I'll send this out on I'll just do it on Slack unless anyone's not on Slack. And then again, as Arno said, we could kind of comment on there and just vote on different things or make suggestions. All right.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.